Community Focus has been brought to you by the Crum Agency, providers of MEMIC insurance. Their telephone number is 734-254-1976, and they are online at krummagency.com.
You're listening to the station focusing on the Plymouth Canton community. This is Community Focus on 88.1 The Park.
Good evening and welcome to Community Focus. I'm Ida. On Community Focus, we talk to people of interest in our community. The Wilcox Foundation sponsors an annual scholarship competition. For the competition, they have students write essays about the history of Plymouth. The competition began in 2001 when students wrote essays on the history of Plymouth's Old Village. This year, the foundation asked students to write about the participation of Plymouth residents as good citizens building and bettering their communities and countries in past years. Today on Community Focus, we will talk with one of the essay contest winners about their essay and research. Our guest is Grace Grimes. Grace is a 2016 Canton graduate and one of two 3000 award winners. Her essay is on the history and roles of women in the development of Plymouth. So Grace, my first question was, what made you decide to enter the essay competition?
I first decided to enter because I had just been going into the Canton office looking at all the different scholarships that they had available. I had really been looking to go out of state, so I was looking to find any of the scholarships that I could.
And what made you choose the topic that you did?
So you had to choose something that pertained to Plymouth history. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to come up with a more unique perspective. And at the time, my sister was really involved in writing a feminist blog, and a lot of it involved around, obviously, women's rights. And so that got me kind of thinking about, I guess, the history of Plymouth women.
Mm-hmm. So what time span did your essay cover?
From the 1930s to present.
And how were women viewed and treated in that time span? And did it differ in Plymouth compared to other places in the world, do you think?
And so what I tried to focus on was how women were making a difference. Mm-hmm. And so that was really difficult to find because I actually went to the Plymouth Historical Museum, which everyone there was incredibly lovely. As soon as you walked in, you tell them exactly what information you want, and they just hand you all these different papers and documents and old letters. And so before I had gone to the Plymouth Historical Museum, I had tried looking at old microfiche at the Plymouth District Library and picking up different books, and it was frustrating because a lot of the information was on the men of Plymouth, and so it wasn't until I actually went to the Historic Museum that I was actually able to find a lot of the information. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of the times they were put in the background, so although they were doing important things, they weren't seen as super important until more recently now. Women are definitely recognized for everything that they do.
Mm-hmm. So your essay was about how women successfully built and ran institutions of health, education, and business, and they involved themselves in government after getting suffrage. So can you give us a short summary of your essay?
Yes. When I focused on the medical aspect, I talked a lot about Ina and Elma, who were two sisters, and they created the first and only medical institution for 20 years, which was the Plymouth Hospital, and that was actually inside the Thomas Patterson House, which is on Main Street. That was something that was really thriving. That was really neat. Then I also touched on their roles in education, and that was where I actually found the most information. I think definitely that's something that's common. Women were the primary teachers, and that's something that's still true today. Yeah. I don't know what the statistics are or anything, but I definitely know there's a lot more women teachers than men. And then I also talked about government. The main person that I focused on there was Ruth Houston Whipple. She was the first woman on the Plymouth City Commission in 1932. And then she was also the mayor in 1942. And she was really an interesting person. A couple of the things that she did was she tried to promote sanitary milk inspection codes. And she definitely was an advocate for the environment. She actually made Plymouth the city of lilacs, which I thought was kind of cool.
And when you were researching, did you find that it was a time period where it was hard for women to do these kinds of things? Where it's frowned upon for women to take these kinds of roles and do these kinds of things?
Everything that I kind of found was more positive, but I guess I wrote my essay trying to be positive about everything.
Yeah, I get that. And you already talked about this, but could you list some of your favorite examples of what Plymouth women did and how they helped?
I think it would have to be Lena and Elma, because I actually got to look at the report from the hospital, which is really cool. So rather than having a notebook writing about someone, you got to see firsthand the documents of them, writing accounts of people that they helped get better. And actually, there was this really cool quote. It was Dr. Charles Westover, I guess, used the hospital for a lot of his medical uses, and he wrote in an account, it was the cleanest place I ever saw. You could eat off of the floor. So that was kind of cool.
What would you say are some attributes and accomplishments you admire about the Plymouth Women you researched?
There was this really cool Ford plant that specialized in electrical parts, like switches and regulators, and they only employed single or widowed women. And that was the 1920s and 1940s. So that was really interesting. I'm not exactly sure. There wasn't a whole lot of information on that, but I thought that was kind of an intriguing thought that it was only women in that plant. There was also the Wayne County Library formed by this woman, Loletta. It was interesting.
And so in your essay, I read that Plymouth women not only devoted themselves to healthcare, brought attention to economic struggles, and fought for the right to vote for elected officials, but actually opened the first medical institutions in Plymouth, like the Plymouth Hospital, gave Sunday off time to not only tutor, but strengthen students' characters as teachers, remained proactive in solving economic problems by successfully individually opening and running businesses, and fought for the right to actually be elected officials. How do you think Plymouth women went above and beyond in serving, advancing, and involving themselves in their communities?
I think rather than just staying in the typical housewife role, women really wanted to involve themselves, and so they definitely pushed for it and tried to not only involve themselves, but became leaders of Plymouth versus just participating.
Yeah, I agree. And so in your essay, you focused on both the past and the present. Do you think there's been a change in how Plymouth women contribute to their community, or has it remained mostly the same?
I think that it's definitely more common for women to be involved more today. I don't know if there's much of a change.
Let's talk about your bibliographies. I read your essay and I noticed that your bibliography was 2 pages long. What kinds of information sources and research tools did you use for your essay? And how did you begin the process of selecting the focus of your research?
So I think I started with the Plymouth District Library, and I just literally looked up Plymouth women and got some books. And then they have like an online database, and they're trying to expand that because they don't have a lot of the older microfiche on there. So they're trying to work on that. And that was also something, there's like a corner of the library where they have the microfilm, and it doesn't tell you what's on it. You just grab a random slide from a random year, and you stick it in, and it's like old film that you would put in like a movie projector, and you slide it through the little glass case, and then you gotta like wind it. It's real fun. And then you sit and you read through newspapers and old articles, and so that was kind of a long process. The best part, I think, was going to the Plymouth Historical Museum because you emailed them and told them what you were looking for, and you could give them specific names, and you came in there and they just handed you all of the information that you needed. So that was very helpful.
As part of your research, did you do any interviews?
Yeah, so I interviewed my teacher with physics just because that was the most convenient thing, and that was pretty cool.
What would you say was the most new and challenging part of doing your research?
Starting.
Oh, okay.
No. Also, formatting, because it wasn't a regular essay. It was more of a research essay. So the great thing about that is my sister's actually an editor. So I was able to be like, hey, you, how do I, write and cite citations you had to include? And that was really great.
Were there any research methods that you wish you did, but you didn't?
No, I think I covered a lot of bases.
There was one quote included in your essay. It was, behind every great man is a great woman. So what does this quote mean to you?
I really liked that quote because it kind of embodied what I was trying to get around, that men were seen as more prominent roles, I guess. You know how I said how everything, when I kept trying to find information, you kept finding things about men. But then behind the scenes, women were doing these great things. And so it wasn't as much in your face isn't the right word, but it wasn't seen as much, but that was, I guess, happening behind the scenes.
And through this whole process, what lessons did you learn about being a historian from entering the competition and writing the essay?
That it's not an overnight thing.
Yeah.
You have to get a bunch of different sources because you can't just take one perspective. You can't be one-sided on things.
Yeah. For next year, would you recommend that seniors enter the competition? And
yes,
why?
I would. It is a pain in the butt, but it's definitely worth your time because since it is so much work, not as many people apply for it, and it is local, which that again greaters your chances of winning the scholarship. So it's definitely worth your time.
What advice would you give people who try this out?
The Plymouth Historical Museum is fabulous. I love them.
For our last bit, would you like to tell us a little bit more about your plans for college?
Yeah, sure. I'm headed to Northern Michigan University next year, which is in Marquette, and I'm going to be studying zoology with a minor in Spanish, which I'm super, super excited for. And then I plan on, after my 4 years of undergrad, going to grad school for marine biology.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a wrap for this week's Community Focus. Thank you so much, Grace, for joining me and being the young, proactive historian and inspiration that you are. You've been listening to Community Focus. Our guest tonight has been Grace Grimes. Grace is a student scholarship winner in the Wilcox Foundation Essay Contest. You can find out more about the Wilcox Foundation at wilcoxfoundation.org. You can hear Community Focus every Wednesday at 5:45 p.m. on 88.1 The Park, Plymouth and Canton's hit music.
Community Focus has been brought to you by the Crum Agency, providers of Mimic Insurance. Their telephone number is 734-254-1976, and they are online at krummagency.com.